Good day, good day. The hour has struck and it's time to begin. Thank you all so much for coming out this evening. It's been a while since I've seen you. I took the week slow because I needed to prepare and finish this lesson to a point where it was presentable by my standards to show everyone. So I've been very excited to get back to it, and so much to say. Of course, we have the model. The live 2D is here, and it is here to stay. I'm so glad I was able to show this off last week at Cigarette and Birds. I think it was a very fitting kind of reveal for it. I hope everybody was surprised. Before we begin today, I will go ahead and say my hellos to everyone here. Aegon, Heath, Bone Miser, and once again, thank you, Bone Miser, for the raid. Shanaha, very nice to see you. Colby Jack Attack, hello. Very good. Renak, very nice. Hello, welcome in. We are having our lesson on cannibalism today. Thank you very much, and thank you for the follow, Phantom Mariachi. Today is our lesson on cannibalism, and as such, there needs to be a bit of a content warning attached to this. It goes without saying that... Actually, maybe not. There will be no graphic images, no disturbing images will be shown to you, but the topic can be a little bit unsettling, so I please ask make sure you are in a good headspace. Make sure that if you're about to eat dinner, I maybe put it off for a little while. Thank you, thank you. Good to see you, Professor Bloom, and welcome in Phantom Mariachi. We have a lot of exciting new things coming. A lot of good stuff is happening soon. But I think I'll go ahead and get started. I have a lot to say, but I may just save that for the end. This has gotten quite a bit of attention. I wondered if there would be an interest in this sort of thing. And then it turns out I don't stream for a week and I get over 100 followers. So yeah, there is a little bit of a demand for this sort of content, or at least for me. So I'm very glad to see it, very glad to hear it. Unlock that panel. No, not yet. Not yet, Bone Miser. That'll happen one day. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Woozy Dan. Cannibalism. Now, as we go through this, let's go ahead and take a note of the warning in the upper part of the screen. Let me look up with you. Look up. It says, perverse comments and poor humor will result in punitive action. That's not to say that we're going to be completely devoid of humor. This is going to be completely dry and devoid of any jesting, but please, keep topics like war or other perverse things like that to the side. You can make it somewhere else that's not in my chat. That's all I ask. We are going to have fun with this. There's going to be a little bit of tongue-in-cheek. There's going to be a little bit of poking and prodding. So, all I ask is keep things nice. Nice and tidy. Now, let's go ahead and begin. We're going to break this down into several sections today. I have my introduction and my conclusion, and we're going to have 5 main parts. So there's going to be 7 parts in total. Let us begin. I think there's nothing else to really say. Everything I have to say, I'll probably wait until the end. There's so much to go over, so much to say thank you for, but let us begin with our introduction now. To first talk about cannibalism, we need to talk about human nature. We are not so different from our forefathers. Emotions rarely change. Mankind has been subject to its most base of impulses. We experience joy, rage, grief, fulfillment, and despair, just as the people of ancient civilization did. Please do not think of us as a new breed of beast, ever climbing stairs, stepping on the backs of those who lived before us. Good evening, Velik. Glad to see you in here. Let's emulate the Fae. Let's go back 1,000 years and steal a baby from its cradle. Swap it with a baby from a maternity ward, and they will grow up according to their setting. Yep, thank you for the follow, Caleb. Glad to see you in here. We are not very different from people of the past. Good joke, Bird Moz, thank you. And as we feel rage, our ancestors did too. Our predecessors murdered. They waged wars and had battles and conquests. We have eradicated disease, achieved great heights as a race, gone to places once thought unimaginable, and issues that ravaged even the pinnacle of civilizations in the past are a distant memory. But murder, oh, murder is still going strong to this day. Even now, murder and homicide remains a present threat in our lives. We have indeed progressed as a society, yes. We have protections, proceedings that dissuade people from giving in to murderous impulses. Entire industries are dedicated to murder, to preventing it, to prosecuting it, defending accusations against it, to reforming it, to containing it, to simulating it. The murder umbrella reaches wide. And yet, it still occurs, for all the safeguards we put in place for it. Impulses have been and forever will be characteristic of humanity. But at what point does one stop being human? Is the line drawn at murder? It's not an uncommon saying to say that life in prison or to give them a chair is too good for a prisoner. They should have every one of their rights revoked. And this is for what is arguably the most inhuman crime, so antithetical to a functioning society. Is there any greater sin one could commit than the slaughtering of his fellow man? There do exist more violating carnal crimes, or individuals that act hollowly without this bloodlust I've spoken of. But they didn't go as far as they could have. At what point does even the most hardened, stone-cold criminals stop dead in their tracks, bug-eyed and fearful? They've already committed just about the worst crime they could be prosecuted for under the law. Where does even a murderer possess the moral high ground? Anthropophagy. The eating of human flesh by human beings. Oh yeah, it's a good time to eat. Go ahead, before we get too far into this. Oh yeah, Caleb. When you, talk about things like doing, dissections on corpses or that open heart surgery, I had a lot of respect for you. There are things that are far beyond reproach. Gallows humor can get you some distance, but something should remain off limits to me. I can respect that, and I respect what you do in your stream as well. We have the word anthropophagy, the eating of human flesh by human beings. Cannibalism. As I prepare this writing, I am diligent in my research. There are stories, accounts, and images that have to be seen in order to discuss this in good faith. To ignore these would be a gross and flippant rejection of the truth. Why, then, do I choose this topic to subject myself to and share with you all? There is no simple answer. I need to learn. I have to know. I will take it upon myself to accept the entirety of what the world has to offer, and simply hope I come out better for it. To look only for the good and uplifting is to spit in the face of all those who suffered and those that chronicle the experience. You cannot live in a paradise when you ignore the hell beneath you. Knowledge, yes. Knowledge is a very lofty goal. And as for my patience, my viewers here, I apologize once again. I gave you a warning, but I am still responsible for those who cannot look away. The topic of these lessons tends to choose me. The idea burrows itself into my mind and binds itself to my thoughts. It is my own selfishness as to why I choose to share these things. I hope to find contemporaries who do not balk at what the world offers, whether they were born that way or made by my own hand. On the topic of research, there are many accounts of cannibalism documented throughout history. The list is dizzying. How can one be expected to sort through and pick the entries to discuss for a single session? Oh yeah, we're not even like a quarter of the way through this page, Phantom. Woo! Do I pick well-known instances to expand on? Or do I choose a lesser-known one to offer as a new revelation? Thank you, Shanaha. Good evening, Koemi. Hello. For the solution to this enigma, please consider the constant battle of nature and your place to intervene in it. Do you save the bunny from the hawk? Deprive it of its meal? Or do you let the natural order take its course? The answer, if you have attended my lectures before, should come as no surprise. I do not choose what is right. Right is what I designate it to be. This is my stream, my library and lecture hall to impart not only knowledge, but a piece of me with it. Hold the self I offer unto you, with reverence. Before we continue on, we have to consider the morality of cannibalism. But Dr. Pestis, is there anything to consider? You must be out of your mind! Hold on, my straw man. Hold. No one asked you, straw man. That's probably the best bit I've ever gonna do. With the understanding that legality is not morality, let's first examine the law. Cannibalism is not federally illegal. It is up to the states to determine that themselves. Let's list the states that outlaw in alphabetical order. Idaho. Beyond that, it is not a crime in and of itself to consume human flesh. Sourcing is an issue, and you run into the problem of abuse and desecration of a corpse. If you can get around those, then in technicality, you can eat human flesh as you like. Only Bird here. Oh, Bird would love this, wouldn't she? Oh, hello, Sigrid. So, that's the legality of it. Now for true morality. Let's look to a favor of mine when it comes to the morality, production, and consumption of our food. The Omnivore's Dilemma, source down below. The Omnivore's Dilemma, as a book, examines the origins of our food from different angles. Mass-produced corn is compared with organic farming. The meat industry is separated between farm factory meat and small-scale, sustainable, ethical raising of animals. Those idyllic pastures you may imagine. So these different perspectives observed by Poland himself. Also, I'm going to apologize for butchering all the names and pronunciations in this stream, just to get that out of the way. Observed by Poland himself, it serves as a suitable basis to compare the ethics of cannibalism to. Why do I talk about this? It's because, before we get into whether human meat is moral, we first have to look at whether animal, or any meat, is moral. Now, don't worry, I'm not about to try and proselytize and sway your opinion on meat eating from one position to another. We simply have to establish ground rules and a basis for our rhetoric. Good, I'm glad you can make it, Kit. Nice to see you. We're talking about ethics. Is meat ethical? There are many ways to approach this. So let's look at one stance often cited by those who would say no. Animals cannot give their consent to being eaten. And even if they could, the answer would undeniably be no. They do not want to be killed and eaten. It runs counter to every primitive instinct. If we are to believe that animals should have a right to live in a world where it is not necessary for us to consume them, this is a very valid and compelling argument. If we can easily avoid eating them and they do not want to be eaten, then it makes sense to take a stance of vegetarianism to some degree if a person has a dutiful sense of sympathy. Now the fun begins. You may have a dawning sense of dread or apprehension as the roller coaster reaches the apex of our ride. Here's the drop. People are able to consent. We can very easily say, yes, I desire to be eaten and consumed. I wish to cut off a portion of my body for my own consumption, the consumption of friends, or to sell for profit. We've already taken our first step towards besting the consumption of animal meat. I'm not the one to decide what does or doesn't constitute mental illness or an unquiet mind, but if the concept was simply, more popular and accepted, would it still hold that designation? Thank you for the follow, Paru. No. Let's go. Would it still hold that designation? Well, let's think. It's not like this is a new idea. We sell off our bodies all the time. Hair, plasma, sperm, eggs, bone marrow, breast milk, placenta encapsulation. Wait. Yes, placenta encapsulation, folks. That's right, you heard me. The list goes on. Not to mention, prices are indeed ascribed to organs. They possess market values, after all. So the concept of selling off parts of your body isn't new, and often not in the case of life-threatening conditions at all. The central difference here lies in the quality of being a renewable resource. If we could regenerate meat after cutting a slice of loin off, then would it be nearly as taboo? Well, let's think. Let's look at nature. Nature forces animals to eat. That's all they know. But we don't fault the carnivores in nature for fulfilling their instincts. That is what they have evolved to do. Their bodies know of no other way to sustain themselves. We hold higher standards for ourselves nowadays as intelligent beings. We cannot point to the wolf and say, see, they do it. They do it. It is a natural part of life. We don't do a lot of things they do as well. With the blessing of reasoning and higher thought, we have progressed past the bestial instincts of our animal relatives. Reasoning. Reasoning. It's a dangerous thing, isn't it? The ability to draw lines from point A to point B, and then somehow we end up at Z. The Omnivore's Dilemma by Michael Pollan references one such line of dangerous reasoning. Not dangerous in the sense that it threatens harmful action, but dangerous in the sense that it challenges you. When faced with this argument, you have no choice but to defend your stance or change the way you live. Peter Singer, and his book Animal Liberation, had converted thousands to vegetarianism. I hope you're prepared for the curse of knowledge, for I'm about to relay the condensed version of his work from The Omnivore's Dilemma. This is Pollan's reaction and interpretation of his work. Like Pollan says, his argument is disarmingly simple and difficult to refute. I'm very glad. Everybody, you're just being so very kind. Thank you for the nice words. I am reading this chat the entire time. Thank you, Tower Shield. Thank you, Asherbite. Thank you, Aegon. Oh, Eggloaf? We actually have a vegetarian in here. Oh boy, this is gonna be fun. I was hoping like a vegan or vegetarian or even pescatarian would show up. The argument is simple. The first step here is the premise of equality. I'm ready to get cancelled. Here it is. Equality is not a real thing. It is an idea, a concept, and an ideal. It is not, quote, an assertion of fact. People are inherently not equal at all. Some are more intelligent, better looking, gifted, skilled, resistant to disease. Resistant to disease? List goes on. List goes on. We strive for equality, as we should. As we should. But it is not a truth. It is not a truth of the world. Equality is rather the idea that everyone should receive equal consideration, regardless, quote, what they are like or what abilities they have, end quote. This is fair. Equal consideration, because people are inherently not equal. As my source says, philosophers of the past have also reached this conclusion. It's not a new idea. I'm glad everybody likes that. Resistant to disease? Oh, you play Darkest Dungeon? Plague Doctor has great disease resist. But taking this idea further is where most haven't gone. Most philosophers haven't pushed this further. Thinking for the follow, Alda Duck. Singer's primary argument centralizes itself around this quote. If possessing a higher degree of intelligence does not entitle one human to use another for his or her own ends, how can it entitle humans to exploit non-humans for the same purpose? Let's think. Just because someone is, quote, superior, doesn't mean they get to exploit the people they view as beneath them, right? That's equal consideration of... or equal consideration. Poland quickly objects, humans differ from animals in morally significant ways. Yeah, people and animals are different. Singer retorts that yes, pigs and children aren't and should not be treated alike. He says equal consideration of interests is not the same as equal treatment. Children are interested in education. Pigs are interested in rolling in the mud. But where their interests are the same, the principle of equality demands they receive the same consideration. And the one all-important interest humans share with pigs, as with all sentient creatures, is an interest in avoiding pain. Should animals receive the same consideration when it comes to pain? Do they not feel just as a child does? We have animal rescue services for a reason, don't we? We don't just, leave a kitty cat in the sewer grate. We don't leave neglected animals stuck in their pens after a farmer moves out. Both recoil from the threat of injury, which leads to reason that both feel and fear pain just as the other. Why do we prioritize the humans over the animals if they are the identical base instinct? It's the same feeling, it's the same instinct. Does the body it's in matter? Does the threat of pain from a child differ from the threat of pain as an adult or an elderly person? Singer refers to Jeremy Bentham, a philosopher from the 18th century, thank you for the clip by the way, who wrote about how in 1789 the French freed their slaves before the British or Americans had, granting them fundamental rights. 1789. Bentham pondered if the rest of animal creation would gain those rights one day. Oh, good. I'm glad I mentioned Bentham before. I'm glad you know about him. He questioned what characteristics entitle a being to moral consideration. Is the ability of reasoning, or maybe the capacity to have discourse and communicate? If that's the case, then a horse or a dog... Good boy. Best boy. Very good boy. A horse or a dog absolutely trounces an infant in both communication or rational thought. Yes, Hachiko, I'm glad somebody picked it up. It's not a obscure thing in any case, but just a statue of a dog can be hard to place sometimes. A dog absolutely trounces an infant in communication rational thought. He says, the question is not, can they reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer? Can they suffer? If you are not familiar with philosophical discourse, this is an example of an argument called AMC. or the Argument for Marginal Cases, AMC, Argument for Marginal Cases. Now, you may think of this as bringing an argument to the logical extreme and dismiss it, but the nature of being extreme does not inherently discredit an argument. AMC in this case goes as such. There are people whose mental capacity does not meet the level of a chimpanzee. This would include infants, those with diminished mental capacity, the demented, the elderly whose faculties have slipped away, and more. These people are incapable, unable to reciprocate our moral attentions, such as the Golden Rule. But still, they are included in the whole of moral consideration. Why do they get access to the circle of consideration, but reject the chimp from the ranks? I'll put forth a consideration myself. Think and imagine for a moment a vegetable. You'll do. Not a plant, but a human whose existence is simply existing. Thank you very much for the follows, Eggloaf and Honey. They possess no thought, no feeling, no senses are registered, and their brain activity is nil. Oh no, Velik. I'm sorry, Velik. Velik, turn away. You could reasonably say they have no soul. Nothing that would make them human beyond that of a body. They do not feel. They cannot suffer. Yet we still keep them alive and around with zero chance they will ever awake to moral enlightenment. Oh, you chose a bad stream to self-insert, Velik. What we have here is the senseless husk of a person. Somehow, they possess more moral value than the cow who will end up in your hamburger. Those with pets may know what I mean when I say animals possess feelings, personalities, likes and dislikes, interpersonal attachments. Don't think for a minute cows and pigs are born lobotomized. They feel just as your cat or dog does. It's equal consideration. Why do we not give cows and pigs the same equal consideration as a house pet does? How can we chop them up and eat them before even giving a sideways glance towards consuming the nearly lifeless vegetable? I'll stop with Singer's line of reasoning here, but his conclusion is thus. Either we do not owe any justice to the severely mentally diminished, or we owe it to animals with higher capabilities. We come back to the topic of the lesson for today. I will pervert Singer's message in ways he did not intend, yet still rings true in line with his reasoning. We cannot ethically eat meat without first considering human cannibalism before that of thinking, feeling animals. We have established a baseline for the day. We will come back to the topic of morality later to see whether these key points could possibly be met. Let's move on for now and observe an anecdote. We're going to part 3. This is, for lack of a better term, the meat and potatoes. Let's talk about the past. The past is hilarious, isn't it? It's like anything that happened before your lifetime is inherently funny. Comedians have it wrong. Humor is enhanced when it isn't relatable. The Crusades? Comedy gold! The Titanic? A riot! The Black Death? Well... yeah. Yeah. And just look at pirates. Ooh, pirates. Terrors of the sea, reduced costumes, accents, and money printers for Hollywood investors. They're even child-friendly. It should come as no surprise that the less relatable something is, the funnier it has to be, right? So let's have fun. Let's travel back in time to 1846 and test my theory. Look to the popular cannibalism punchline, the Donner Party! Everybody give me a hand for the Donner Party! Come on down! We have these people, probably nameless and faceless to most everyone here. And it's far back enough that there are no, or nearly no, living relatives or direct family living at the time that we can offend. Thank you, everyone. And the resulting cannibalism was even derivative of the choices that led them along the path of their fate. One could say, albeit boldly, they deserve this to a degree. We have a pass, an unlimited, all-access free pass to make fun of the Donner Party. That's not the topic for today. It's not. Russia. Russia is often a verbal punching bag, easy to poke fun at and mock, and for good reason. Their leadership is probably deserving of ridicule. Oh yeah, there's a whole lot of factors that went into the Donner Party. That could be a whole stream in of itself. Talk to Minimancer, I think she'll be swinging by later. She studied the Donner Party, she's told me. But Russian leadership is probably deserving of ridicule. Are the poor Russians lining up for a loaf of bread? Don't forget, a country is composed of people. The general populace didn't deserve what happened to them, like the way the Donner Party did. Thank you very much, Larkspur, for the follow. I'm talking about the Russian famine of 1921 to 1922. The numbers here look so insignificant, just a tick, counted upwards from 1 to 2. But we know it's more than that. That comes out to 1,095 meals per person. What do you think the Russians did during the Russian famine of 1921 to 1922? You look this up, you will be instantly greeted with an image of what they did. Be very careful if you look further into this topic. They will put this front and center on what they did during this time. So be very careful, I warn you. Again, this is far enough back. 100 years in the past. Happy anniversary. We aren't going to offend anyone this happened to, or anyone who remembers this. We can lock this event firmly in the realm of history. Maybe, just maybe, you'll find a descendant who heard stories from their mama or papa about the famine, who noticed how they went gravely quiet when the topic of how they got through the time came up. Thank you very much, Warren Kotatsu. But again, this is a whole nother world across the globe. The probability of the stars lining up for you to meet those conditions is razor thin. Make your jokes as you like. Let's turn the dial 50 years into the future, to 1972. We're getting into the modern age now. What happened in 1972 is none other than 571. 571? Flight 571. Uruguayan Air Force Flight 571. The Andes flight disaster. Now, the Andes flight disaster is recent. The people who survived are likely still around today, and the families of the deceased are very possibly still in mourning for the loss of their loved ones. The wounds are fresh to this day. Still, the situation remains very far removed from us. A plane crash in the mountains? Sounds like a setup for a movie or a book. And the number of people to offend is very limited. Only a handful of survivors and families. Not to mention, again, this is a whole nother world away. We're not going to meet any of these people in our lifetime, unless we specifically seek them out and go out of our way to travel to them in all likelihood. We're sitting in the 1970s. This is easily described as the modern age. The people are named and well known. Their faces are probably well known, plastered everywhere. I think there's a museum dedicated to them. Inadvertent offense is near zero. We can't get any closer to home than that, can we? Can we? We can. All we need to do is look to 1981, and 1988, and 1989, and likely more. The true nature of this section today, are the accounts from the survivors of the Vietnamese refugee boats. I have prepared for us 3 different accounts from 3 different publications from 3 different years. As we move forward, please understand these are not isolated incidents, but rather symptoms of a more systematic failing of governments, desperation, and the human condition. This section will have less of the funny images. Please understand. Let me get a drink. Wet my beak. We will begin, in chronological order, from an article from the New York Times, dating back to August 13th, 1981, titled, "A Vietnamese Orphan Tells of Killings and Cannibalism in 52-Day Sea Escape." We have the account of Dao Van Ke, a 15-year-old boy who arrived from his ordeal weighing 66 pounds, down from the near 100 he was when his journey began. Let's examine his motivations for leaving. Why did this boy decide to leave Vietnam and become a refugee? He had a family. He had a job. Please, I understand you may be enthused, but I'm asking for some sense of decorum. He had a family, he had a job, but it was due to the meddling and imposing force of the government he decided to escape. He worked on a fishing boat, but it was normal for him to be rounded up and forced to do work logging for new housing plots. This would be done under the supervision of armed guards and performed without pay. I believe there's a word for this sort of labor. He also feared the draft, as he was coming up on 18 and feared being sent off to fight and become separated from his family. There's a short anecdote about about a friend of his who deserted and hid, only to be met with arrest. Yeah, job is a very loose term for that. The thought of escape bubbled up in his mind. He joined a group of fishermen, making the total 11 people aboard the ship. Only 5 of those would reach safety. As you might expect, things took a turn for the worse on their voyage and supplies dwindled. Food, water, and fuel ran out. They tried to use their clothes as a sail or to fashion a net, but fishing was useless during the storms in the typhoon season. Large ships passed them by. And then the unfortunate finally happened. The captain and the group told a different teenager aboard to kill himself so the others may eat him. The teenager begged for his life, and the topic was shelved. Dao Van Ku's account says, the teenager attacked the captain as he slept, and the youth fell overboard and drowned. 2 days later, a fight broke out over fish, and a fight occurred. Dao Van Ku hid beneath the deck, and when he came back out, 4 men were overboard. He says he is unaware of how they died. Later, the others held a discussion regarding Dao Van Ku. He was bound, and his shirt pulled up. The captain's nephew beat him over the head with an iron bar, as 2 other men held him down. Another voice said to cut his throat, while a pot of water was set to boil. Luckily, no one followed up on this, and he was spared for the moment. Another passenger soon died, and they were consumed in his place. 2 days later, the threats came back, but they had finally found the shores of Hong Kong on July 26th. Yes, this is a part of history that often gets glossed over. We hear about the Andes, we hear about Russia, we hear about the Donner Party. We don't hear about this, the recent history. It's not a spectacle like a lost plane crash, but it's just poor people trying to go somewhere and eke out a living. It's a shame that this isn't more widely known. The 3 adult survivors later denied attacking Dao Van Ku and the allegations of human cannibalism, saying the head wounds were not inflicted by the beating of an iron rod, but when he got into a fight with another youth. Dao Van Ku denies feeling regret for having fled. When they hit me over the head, and I was lying on the deck, and it bled and hurt, I thought, why did I leave my sisters? Life with them was better. They will eat me. But when I saw the hills here, I no longer regret it. That's our first account. That is his story, his personal experience on what happened. Is this an outlier? Is this a one-off? I don't think it is, because we're going to go into our second newspaper, our second article. The second article we have here is from the Washington Post, titled, Vietnamese Refugees Report Cannibalism on Voyage, dated August 10th, 1988. This article discusses a few different accounts, as well as an overview on the issue. They refer to this phenomenon of refugees fleeing their home country as the Vietnamese, quote, boat people, end quote. On a boat of 52 survivors after a 37-day voyage, it is revealed that 3 children and 2 adults were cannibalized. 2 died of starvation, but 3 have been, quote, forcibly drowned. Quote. The perspective I am interested in here is they noted how 2 American warships passed them and offered food, but they did not take anyone aboard. One would be the USS Dubuque, captained by A.G. Ballion. Quote, in Washington, U.S. Navy officials said Tuesday they are investigating allegations that a U.S. naval vessel may not have provided enough assistance to the refugees when they stopped the drifting vessel in the South China Sea on June 9th. I wonder what became of that investigation. Perhaps dishearteningly, some Southeast Asian countries adopted policies refusing refugee boats from landing, authorizing force. An account from a refugee says that an average of 8 ships passed by them every day. 8 ships passed by them every day. The only ones stopping to help being the American warships. Quote, a US Navy official, or a US Navy spokesman, said such encounters were a fairly common occurrence. End quote. We have an account of the deaths of those cannibalized. We know how it happened. One man begged to starve to death first, instead of being killed for food. He was held overboard and drowned. Another woman was drowned and her body boiled. 2 children died of starvation, but survivors say the 11-year-old resisted being drowned. Out of 109 people, 58 died on the journey. We see another common theme appear here. Accounts of murder and cannibalism have contradictions between different testimonies. However, a refugee official who conducted some of the interviews said, I think it is reasonably well confirmed that cannibalism did take place. This is a quote from the official who interviewed these people. It's a common theme. People are often quick to deny that such things occurred. Is it shame? Is it fear of legal action? Who knows? Murder charges were being investigated at the time of this article by Philippine officials. This article is a very cut and dry collection of the facts, and that's respectable. With an issue so close to sheer desperation, it becomes difficult for journalism to remain impartial and neutral on topic. It'd be all too easy to begin pulling on heartstrings and push any narrative you want. How disgusting of their home country to push them to this point. How cold of the countries to deny them entry. How wonderful of the Philippines to welcome them in. How heartless of the boats to pass them by. How irresponsible of the US warship to not offer refuge. How strong of the survivors to suffer and overcome the ordeal. How awful of the survivors to resort to such a barbaric act. It takes a strong resolve to remain impartial and not craft a narrative to decry or champion certain perspectives. That's why I chose this article in particular. It doesn't push anything on you, it's just a collection of the facts for the most part. I hope you can appreciate that in journalism. Our last article here is from the Los Angeles Times, dated February 24th, 1989. It is titled, I Killed to Help the Living. Cannibal or Savior? Viet refugee says he was both. This is the account of Vietnamese survivor Phung Quang Minh. Oh boy. Let's look. Quote, by his own admission, Minh was the man who assumed control of a foundering Vietnamese refugee vessel last year and killed at least one of the people on board in order to feed himself and the others. End quote. We have not only a victim, but the account of one who, by his hand, others perish so that many may live. This is the man that on the board of one of these ships killed someone else so that others may consume them. This is the account of a Vietnamese refugee arrested by Philippine officials after 37 days at sea. He was arrested, but it was determined the government had no standing to prosecute him. Different nationality, the boat wasn't registered to the Philippines. It was in international waters, I believe, or not Philippine waters, so they had no standing. When the refugees were rescued and stationed in camp, Min was among those who were targeted by the animosity of other passengers. Quote, Min said that much of what has been said about him and reported in the press is not true. Not true? Can we not trust the press? He said the killing and the cannibalism were not just his idea, that it was agreed to by all of the remaining refugees among those who had set out ill-prepared for what they thought was to be a voyage of only a few days. The others turned on him later, he said, because they did not want to accept the blame for what they all had done. They did not want to take the responsibility. Part of the account also comes from the documents and testimony of a captain who assisted them during the 37-day ordeal on June 9th. Captain Alexander G. Ballion of the U.S. Amphibious Transport Dubuque. Wait. What? Philippines? 37 days. June 9th? Captain A.G. Ballion and the USS Dubuque? Doesn't that sound familiar? Ladies and gentlemen, my patience. I'm very proud of myself. For this lesson today, I have found an article from another newspaper 6 months later, detailing the follow-up of our second story. We will learn the fate of that captain under investigation and hear the account of one of the leaders who directed the killing and cannibalization of those 3 children, man and woman. This is the follow-up to our second article. We're going to hear about one of the people that killed and ate those people on board. This is the account of Feng Kong Min, 33 years old, and one of the leaders who directed and killed at least one of the deceased but himself by his own admission. To quote Min, he says, "Because of the other people on the boat, I did this thing, and I hoped God blessed me. I am a Christian. I killed this man on the boat to help the living. Personally, I think it's wrong, but so many people needed to eat." That's a tough position for him, don't you think? Very tough position. Min was one of the 10 arrested initially for their role in what occurred, but they have been released. He has not joined the rest out of worries that he'd be mauled or murdered by the others. The animosity seems to have subsided 8 months later, as Min currently works as a camp janitor. As for truth in reporting and the accounts of his fellow survivors, Min said that much of what has been said about him and reported in the press is not true. He said that the killing and cannibalization were... Did I already do this? I already did this. Killing cannibalization were everybody's idea, that's right, I'm just referencing. They said that everybody chose this. Everybody was on board with this. It was not his idea. It was not his sole idea to do this. After only 3 days at sea, the engines broke down on their ship. Before the refugees had seen the USS Dubuque, Min had already taken up the role of leadership for the group. And after receiving supplies from the Dubuque, they were satisfied for a short time. It was only on the 28th day that the idea to use the dead had become a spoken thought. Some say they disapproved, or agreed due to being too weak to resist. There are allegations that Min and his men used beatings to force people to bail out the boat or stop people from distributing water. And Min says in his account that all of the people in the boat agreed to eat the dead and dying. They would commemorate the day and remember it in their honor. June 18th. You know, we have a good number of people here. June 18th? Happy birthday. One friend of the dead said he protested killing and eating him, but Min says that even the friend agreed at the time. He quotes, "I did not want to do the wrong thing," he said. "There were so many people. All of these people believed in me and asked me to keep discipline in the boat. And when they decided to use the dying, they asked me to do it." If there's something that needed to be done, and people were asking you to do it, if you were the leader, would you do it? Would you take upon that role yourself? If somebody has to do it, could you offer yourself up to be the one? Who do you believe? Did everyone meekly agree to these propositions? Or were they resisted? Ponder if those who live to speak out against Min would have survived the 37 days without supplementary nutrition. He says, "I'm afraid the people of the world misunderstand," Min said. "I was only a member in a group of persons, so I didn't have the ability to force them to follow me. I was only a man who's thinking more clearly than the others." Draw your own conclusions here, everyone. What do you know about human nature and true desperation? Could you force somebody to do that? Could you force somebody to kill another person and prepare them for consumption? Could you force somebody to eat? If they prepared it and it's in front of you, could you really force somebody to eat it, shove it down their throat? You can choose whose account you want to believe. Let's backtrack to that American ship and the captain who stopped to help. Captain Alexander G. Ballion and the U.S. Amphibious Transport Dubuque. We left our second account off investigating allegations that not enough support was given. Our second article, the Washington Post one, actually gives us numbers on what all was provided. Let's look. According to a Navy official, the amphibious transport ship USS Dubuque provided the refugees with 300 pounds of fresh fruit, 167 pounds of canned food and rice, 50 gallons of fresh water, and navigational charts. That sounds generous, especially considering 10 or 20 of their numbers had died at this point by jumping off and swimming after other boats. So let's look at that investigation. The charges presented against Ballion were dereliction of duty and disobeying orders for failing to rescue the refugees. He did, however, provide directions to the nearest land when he dropped off the supplies. Think for a minute in your hearts. Was this enough? Was he obligated to do more? We heard that an average of 8 ships passed by them every day, with only the American ships being the ones to stop. Do the math, and that's only 2 American ships out of nearly 300 helping. And don't forget how he said many countries are not welcoming to the boat people, closing their shores or authorizing force against them. Does or should the burden of relief need to come from foreign assistance? This is largely irrelevant to our account, as the US Navy has their own guidelines and standards set forward for how they should conduct themselves. The politics of the situation are far beyond just the captain himself. Valian was convicted of dereliction of duty, and given a letter of reprimand. He was, however, acquitted of disobeying orders, a more serious charge. Now back to Min. What of his new life? Has he gotten back in touch with his family now that he is safe? Min's mother has rejected him after hearing the accounts of what occurred. She sent him a newspaper article and demanded to know if the allegations about him were true. He tried to explain in a letter, but she did not believe him and will no longer communicate with him, he said. His own mother. At the time of the article, Min is recovering from a deep depression and volunteers at a hospital, though he still feels the pangs of loneliness. He has no friends or family in the refugee camp. Min holds a hope for a future. He wants to resettle in a different country, preferably the United States. Quote, "Sooner or later," he said, "some country will accept him." End quote. We will end Min's account with one last quote from him. "Please explain to all the people of the world that I had to do that to keep all of the people living. We were at sea in huge waves. I had no other choice." I'll do right by him and tell everyone that. He had to do that to keep all the people living. That's it. I have nothing to offer you here besides the knowledge of these accounts. No posturing or prose from me. I do ask one thing. Think long and hard about the company you keep when you make a joke about something as depraved as human cannibalism. You don't know what darkness lurks motionless in the heart of man. That's part 3 finished, everybody. We're nearing the halfway point. We're going to move on to a new section. Let me take a sip here. Now push out some childhood joy. Yeah. I warned everyone here that the topic... I'm not sure what everyone was expecting when they heard cannibalism. Maybe not soul-crushingly depressing, but... that's what the truth of the world is. You can't have to do justice by the historic records. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. I'm glad people are tuning in, paying attention. I'm glad I can try and teach something to people. That is probably as close to dark as we're going to get for today, so you can ease up a little bit. Let's move onwards to something else. Let's move onward to a world of safety. Safety, we're safe here. A world in which nothing can touch you. The only thing you have to fear is the darkness in the heart of man, given form unto the world. Thank you, Velik. When you messaged me and I told you it would be hitting closer to home, I meant it. So for everyone else, I considered having a section on the nature of prions and Kuru, a very well-known disease, prion disease spread through cannibalism, but I wanted to choose things that were closer to home, that seemed too foreign, too exotic, that we can't possibly relate to it. We could say, oh, those funny tribal people with their funny customs. What are they doing over there eating people? Huh? It just felt too different from us. I needed something that was a little bit more homey. In this world of darkness, the only thing you have to fear is the darkness in the heart of man given form into the world. In here, the only thing to be afraid of is the impression that might be left behind on you. It's not real. I'm referring to... Hello, hello, Minimancer. Glad to see you. Let me give you a shout out very quickly. You've come at a good time. We are just starting our next segment. Oh, there's so many people with the word the Minimancer. We are beginning our next segment here. You just missed our topic on the Vietnamese boat refugees. Thank you very much. Now. Very good. That's right, discretion. Everybody, a little bit of content warning for everybody joining in right now. Playing Deltarune, I recall, yes? Yes. I'm referring to none other than the world of fiction. We can create only the world we like in fiction. Any fantasy, every errant thought you may have has its place here. There is no wrong. And as such, there is a lawlessness. Thank you for the follow, Prisoner 701. You know 24601? There's a lawlessness here, an anarchy of sorts. I'd like to think I'm an idealist in an ideal world. I want to believe that greatness is recognized. The cream floats to the top, and the invisible guiding hand will naturally select those worthy. The people designate what worth is in this ideal world. And the people decided on one particular figure to solidify in the halls of history and culture. Or we normally decry and find disgust in the act of cannibalism. It becomes the singularly transfixing aspect of our figure. Perhaps it isn't odd that we seek out that which has no place in reality. Like an exotic food, it tastes so foreign we can't help but be entranced by it, salivate over it. I'm talking about the man and terror that will exist in the halls of horror, literature, cinema, and the public's mind until the archives of the world turn to dust. Hannibal Lecter. We will be referring to his original book, depiction by Thomas Harris here. Not his film or television portrayals, as wonderful as they are. Mads is great. I'll be honest here. At one point previously, I never saw Hannibal Lecter as insane. If you are a reasonable, respectable person, then you have little to fear. He does not act impulsively or without reason for the most part. Very well, good. Thank you very much for the raid. Let me give you a shout out as well. Hello, hello. I hope you're doing well. This is a bit of a content warning for everybody dropping in. We are discussing cannibalism. There will be no graphic images, but if you are unsettled by the topic, you can please excuse yourself. I don't want any adverse effects come to you. Thank you. We are in the middle of discussing our next topic, Hannibal Lecter. The principle is simple. If you do not have value in who you are, then value will be found in what you are. And his sense of obligation is admirable. He toys with Clarice and sends her off when they first meet. But when she suffers a great indignation on her departure, he feels a sense of responsibility wash over him, because it was for him she was there in the first place. I'm not going to continue gushing over him, but just know that I always saw him as a respectable figure, more practical than anything. Hearing this lesson today has opened my eyes, however, to a new perspective. One that I wouldn't be able to achieve without formal research and seeking out the works of those who specialize in the field. But I am not an expert. There's much to be said and dissected in a character such as his. Many people have many things to say about him. So let's turn the tables on the doctor and turn him into the patient today. We will discuss a character analysis taken from the American Journal of Psychotherapy. There's my source down there below for you. This is a character analysis from the American Journal of Psychotherapy. Now, this paper isn't exactly meant for the average layman or remedial public, so I will do my best to condense and translate the terms and concepts set forth in it for our purposes and understanding here. In a brief word, this paper will look at Lecter, Lecter from an object's relations perspective. That term is going to come up a lot, so remember it. This is an object's relations perspective, which is to say that Lecter's early interpersonal childhood relationships and development will be the main focus here for establishing his adult character and behaviors. I'll repeat that again. Lecter's early interpersonal childhood relationships and development will be the focus for establishing his adult character and behaviors. Gregory will propose that Lecter is not compelled by biological impulses or sadistic drives, but rather, he is a victim. He is a victim of post-traumatic stress disorder, unable to avoid psychotic breaks with reality to reenact his early traumas. Would you ever think of that? Hannibal Lecter? PTSD? Huh. The object's relations theory proposed by Melanie Klein is utilized to explain how Lecter is so overwhelmed by flashbacks of his childhood traumas, his fantasies of revenge eclipse his sense of reality to such an extent he must kill and eat parts of some of his victims to rid himself of his horrors. That's fascinating, isn't it? Would you believe that Hannibal the Cannibal, so sophisticated and fearsome, was haunted so? Such a slave to his traumas? To begin with the basis for this theory, we must first look at the origins of Lecter's namesake. We begin with a trip into the past to 183 BC, to the age of the Romans and Carthage. Carthaginian General Hannibal was scorned for his military genius and use of strategy and cunning in battle. Not unlike the terrifying and brutal way Lecter commits his escapes from captivity. The image begins to form a picture here, though we must look at further events to solidify the concept. In all likelihood, Lecter's namesake was also a cannibal, as historians say that, quote, during the Punic Wars, retreating soldiers had no choice but to eat human flesh. End quote. Alright then. So we have a military genius, who was also likely a cannibal, but there's one more point. The last point of General Hannibal's tale that we can relate to Lecter's traumas is how the Romans, in an attempt to demoralize the general, cut off his brother's head and tossed it over the walls into his camp. It had the opposite effect, and the general was angered, spurring him onwards to avenge his sibling's death and achieve even greater military feats. So now, with the basis for his namesake established, one can see how these parallels suggest author Thomas Harris wants us to believe that all of Hannibal Lecter's evil deeds, including murder and cannibalism, are like those of his historic namesake, motivated by his desire to avenge the death of his sibling. we need to take a look at what happened to Lecter. To quickly summarize the decisive event in Lecter's early life, you would actually need to read past Silence of the Lambs. You need to finish the book. Begin Hannibal. Read deep into Hannibal, the sequel, to see the picture for his trauma. Lecter was born in Lithuania to a decidedly upper-class family. The family estate was caught in a war, and his parents were killed in artillery and machine gun fire. Deserters then encroach on the estate, and Lecter and his little sister, Misha, is pulled away out of Lecter's arms by the deserters to play, before he hears the telling thud of the axe. His devout and fervent prayers to see her again eventually reach their cruel end when Lecter spots Misha's little teeth in the outhouse. That is Lecter's trauma. That is the basis of his early childhood that serves as his PTSD for the rest of his life, unable to avoid his breaks with reality. Klein writes, all children go through repressed and unconscious stages which, quote, we still observe in primitive people cannibalism and murderous tendencies of the greatest variety. Thank you for the follow. Thank you. Leninian. This sounds brutal, but think about some toddlers you may have seen. You ever actually been around young children? They won't hesitate. They won't hesitate to squish bugs, and you have to be careful they won't smother another kid or pick up a puppy by its neck and whip it around until it goes limp. The act of murder doesn't care whether you understand it or not. The saying, kids are cruel, is not baseless or spiteful necessarily. And the biting! That's right, Dr. Boomsad, you actually predicted their next paragraph. The biting! Children love to bite, whether good or bad. Continuing on with Gregory's article, she refers to Melanie Klein's paper in which she describes this idea of oral aggression. That's the term they use, oral aggression. We see this thing commonly spring up in Harris's works. Children love to bite, and eventually grow out of it. Lecter is a cannibal, but he does not only partake in a formal dining setting. Lecter uses his teeth and biting to attack his victims, such as the incident which prompted his iconic mask, which I'm sure you can all picture now. See? That's the reason. He bit the event that did this. He bit a nurse's eyes, broke her jaw with his teeth, and bit out her tongue. Oral aggression is a recurring theme in the nature of Lecter's lapses. Yeah. This leads to the next important concept I have to convey. The whole overarching thing is the object's relations theory. We're getting into the specific of it. The paranoid schizoid position. If I'm not misrepresenting this, the paranoid schizoid position refers to a period shortly after birth, in which objects, both physical and conceptual, are split into distinct categories of good and bad. That's right. After birth, as a very, very young child, you see the world as good and bad. Good things, bad things. I'll go ahead and move this over here, and let me go ahead and move this out of the way. Yeah, right there, that looks good. So, that's the paranoid schizoid position. Things are good and bad. These impressions are carried onward into childhood, adolescence, and adulthood to varying degrees. Here's the kicker. Gregory theorizes that Lecter is locked in this state, the primitive paranoid schizoid position. We heard about how Lecter is a victim of his PTSD. He's overwhelmed by his early traumas. He hasn't grown out of it. He still sees the world as good and bad the same way an infant does. What do we mean by that? What could that mean? Let's look. He is stuck reliving these experiences. He's reliving these. Look to one singular memory Lecter relapses to. In that barn where he awaited his death, the leading anxiety, the paranoid schizoid position, unquote, death. Lecter sees a deer with an arrow sticking out of it before it is hunted and killed by deserters preceding the events of his sister's death. Before his sister died, he saw a deer with an arrow sticking out of it. That's important. In Freudian theory, this would be a screen memory he cannot repress, and it focuses its way to the forefront of Lecter's, quote, memory palace, end quote. Gregory compares this to Cerberus. Hi, boy. Cerberus, the gatekeeper of hell. The memory of the deer and the arrow holds the gates of Lecter's deeper trauma, Misha's death and cannibalization, at bay. The deer is the gatekeeper. Instead of having his trauma with Misha bubble up, the deer keeps that at bay. It happened before Misha's death. Look to how Lecter was initially apprehended, preceding the events of Red Dragon. For those that don't know, Red Dragon is the prequel to Silence of the Lambs, in which goes after a whole different serial killer. But he was in there. He was already in jail. Let's look at how Lecter was caught. Lecter is caught by Will Graham by the identical stab marks a murder victim had to a medieval wound chart. Yeah, the stag symbolism. I'm glad you caught that, Bellic. That's right. Medieval wound chart. If you watch the show, you may remember this. The method here is secondary to the person. The victim that got Lecter caught was a bow hunter. The victim was a bow hunter Lecter attended to in the emergency room for an injury in which they had fallen out of a tree and the arrow pierced through their leg. This imagery of the man with the arrow overwhelms Lecters with flashbacks to the deer and subsequently Misha's death, to the point where he is compelled to stalk this man and brutally murder him. Good evening. Hello, Kano. The paranoid schizoid position is reinforced here. This reinforces our theory. Lecter sees the medieval wound chart as good, is instructive, artistic, thus it is a good object. In his mind, Lecter is transforming the man, and consequently the deer, from bad objects to good ones. The deer is a bad object. Misha's death, bad object. Man stabbed by bow, evocative of bad objects. Turn bad object into good object. Wound chart. Very good. Very artistic. Good object. That's how Lecter's stuck in the primitive paranoid schizoid position. In his mind, Lecter is transforming the man and consequently the deer from bad objects to good ones. Note, at this point, Lecter is already an established serial killer, but he did not feel the need to cannibalize this man in particular, for he was too close to the associations of Misha's cannibalization. You can't eat this man. This man is evocative of Misha's memory. He's not going to eat this man because that would be like eating Misha. Anybody else is fair game, but not the bow hunter. That's how Hannibal Lecter was caught, in case anybody was wondering. Back in Strifeful Place. Huh. There's another aspect of Lecter that he carries into his adult life, and that is his faith, or lack thereof. Lecter... Oh, Dr. Boomsloud, his sister was killed and eaten. When I say that they found her little teeth in the outhouse, the deserters killed and ate her, and I know the show goes into this. I can't recall off the top of my head if the book specifies, but it is likely that Lecter also survived by eating Misha. He was sustained with her body. Can't recall off the top of my head if the book confirms that. I would need to double check. Lecter shares his hobby of collecting stories about church collapses, buildings falling on worshippers as they go and pray to God. And he'll say it with a smirk, making sure to point out their groveling. How can modern faith possibly be connected to cannibalism? The answer is quite easily, and reinforces the theory of Lecter's paranoid schizoid position. I'll quote a passage from the paper that succinctly explains the link between Lecter, cannibalization, and theism. It's a long one, but it's very important. Lecter's cannibalization may also be regarded as a literal and negative enactment of the Catholic rite of communion. At the moment the wine and bread are consumed, the faithful believe they are transubstantiated into the actual body and blood of Christ. You see? We don't really put communion and cannibalization next to each other, but in the terms of the faith, that is what they believe is happening. The moment Lecter consumes his victim's organs, he may believe they are literally transformed from bad objects to good ones, like communion. Transform the bread into the body. Lecter is transforming the body into a good object. As Lecter reintrojects these good objects, he seems to believe they will bring him salvation, just as the Holy Sacrament of Communion is believed to do for Catholics. He's not doing this because he thinks it's sophisticated or because he's tasty. He may be doing it because he thinks it'll bring salvation. He's trying to bring as many good objects into his body as he can. Hannibal Lecter is unable to appreciate the religious metaphor. That's right, we don't need to go too far into Catholic rites of communion, but just understand that's the basis of what this topic is about. Let's return to the bow hunter. Gregory theorizes that inflicting those wounds on his body may be an attempt on Lecter's part to reproduce the crucifixion of Christ. The bow hunter was killed and died for the sins of the deserters who cannibalized Misha, just as Christ died for the sins of the world. It's a bit of a sacrifice, right? It's a bit of an allegory. The bow hunter died for the deserters. Christ died for the world. Lecter staunchly rejects God, equating it to a bad object in the paranoid schizoid sense. That's right. He sees God as a bad object. He doesn't reject God's existence, necessarily. He perceives God as evil or vengeful, unworthy of worship, and cruel in his dealings. And it's easy to see why he might take this stance. As Lecter waited in that barn after his sister was taken from him, he wished and prayed to see her again with all his heart. Quote, "The prayer consumed his 6-year-old mind," Harris writes, "but it did not drown out the sound of the axe." As Lecter sees Misha as a good object, it stands to reason that all parts of her are good objects, including her teeth. To see these specifically discarded into the latrine, to be desecrated and defecated upon, Lecter places the blame upon God, and refuses or is unable to see God as a good object. Gregory quotes a passage from Hannibal, saying that Lecter had not been bothered by the consideration of deity, other than to recognize that his predations pale beside those of God, who is in irony matchless, and in wanton malice beyond measure. Oh, let me move the horns out of the way. Back over here. That's what he's saying. He's saying, God is evil. God will do whatever he pleases. God is malicious, spiteful, harmful. Here it is. God is a bad object, who wantonly and wickedly destroys even the faithful. Lecter, being a doctor and medical professional, commonly holds the balance of life in his hands, playing God in one sense. See? Lecter is a medical professional. He's a good thing. He's a good object. Medical professional is good. Medicine, intelligent, good. And in the other sense, he reciprocates what he believes God to do, cruelly and heartlessly taking life. He is playing God, but the ideal of it he carries in his heart. In this manner, he is rationalizing his actions, imitating the cruel deity that he often sees worshipped or praised. That's it. God is a thing of worship and praise, but also a very bad thing. So Lecter is going to play both sides of it. He'll save lives, and he'll take lives. He'll be God. That's our interpretation, or that's our character analysis of Hannibal Lecter from professionals. From an object's relations perspective, utilizing the paranoid schizoid position, Lecter is locked into his childhood traumas. He's a victim. He's not capable of doing anything else. That's not to say we should pity him, but think about that next time you ever watch Hannibal, if you want to rewatch it. Try and see him as more of a victim, unable to separate from his breaks in reality. Now, we have to move onwards. I hope many people here have actually read Hannibal. I've enjoyed it. I've seen the movies, the books. The ending of the Hannibal movie was a betrayal of the source material, I've got to say. But that's neither here nor there. What is here is part 5. My patience, I don't want to hurt you. I'm going to show you a video reenactment of what I wrote once, but have ultimately decided to scrap for reasons I will detail afterwards. There will be no images accompanying the short reading, so do not fear. Please take a look at what I was planning to do. I've put a lot of thought into how I want to do this next segment that wouldn't be jarring or a violation of the terms of service of the platform. The exact wording of the relevant section only spans a single sentence. Quote, "Content that exclusively focuses on extreme or gratuitous gore and violence is prohibited." End quote. How exclusive is exclusive, and how gratuitous is gratuitous? And does what I'm about to do even fall in that purview? I wouldn't label what I'm doing as either of those, but it is always a good thing to be aware of your biases. I'm about to show a few images of meat. Nothing you wouldn't find outside of a normal kitchen, but if you are sensitive to depictions of meat for whatever reason, please look away or change to another tab while you listen. Here is an image of meat on a cutting board. This is actual pork from a pig, fit for human consumption. I'm not doing a bit here, this is actual pork. Here's another image. Here are many images, except one. One of these is a more exotic cut, maybe like veal. I doubt that most people will be able to spot the odd one out here. How does it feel knowing that one of these you're looking at right now isn't pork? No, everybody. Like I said beforehand, I was not going to show the images. That was what I was planning to do. I was planning to have images accompanying that, but that was just an example of what I was not doing. Because I was worried. I was planning to play coy. In that collage of inoffensive meat, there would be hidden among their ranks one picture of human flesh, indistinguishable from the rest. I was planning on having just a big collage of images of pork, and one of those would not be pork. That's what I was planning to do. That's what I scrapped. I had the defense of plausible deniability on my side, and the safety of guessing that Twitch would not try and reverse image search each and every picture to find the source. But as I thought over how I could navigate the rules safely, and do so in a manner that keeps me protected, I realized I was failing and neglecting to protect you, my patients, both legally and ethically. From my understanding of battery, it is considered to be any offensive action intended to cause harm or emotional distress. So in addition to laying hands on somebody, simply scaring them or feeding them food, which goes against their principle, falls under that ruling. You jump out at somebody, they trip and they hit their head and die. That's battery, as far as I understand the law. And morally, I simply can't do that to you. I can't bear the thought that someone would lie awake at night troubled, even for a moment because they had simply attended my stream. I will accept all the world has to offer, but I cannot expect that from you as well. I will shield you. Come rest under my wing from the terrors that assault and try to worm their way into your life. You may do your own investigation into the matter, and I will set you on the path, but nothing more. Face the curse of knowledge at your own peril, and do not have it forced upon you. The true nature of this section, and my previous toss writing, would be the tale of one man who navigated the labyrinth of ethics. We come back from part 2, we're going back to ethics. Part 2 was just posturing, prose, hypotheticals. This is reality now. He would present the matter of cannibalism in a nearly unassailable way from a practical standpoint. This man ate his own foot and served it to his friends. Yeah. I'm not exaggerating here, this isn't clickbait. This man ate his foot and served it to his friends. I will regale you with the tale of one Reddit user. Oh, that explains everything, a Reddit user. I will regale you with the tale of one Reddit user that begins in the aftermath of a motorcycle crash. This type of language goes against my sensibilities and typical conduct, but here is what we know of his name and identity. I will henceforth refer to him as simply Shiny. Now the big question. How? How can someone ethically perform cannibalism? I don't know. Well, wait, who is it? Dr. Pestis! No, we're not. I didn't ask you, Strong. Go away. I wasn't asking you. Let me walk you through his story and check off each concern one at a time. In 2016, Shiny was on his bike I think motorcycle bike, and had the misfortune of a car crash. He was sent flying, and his foot was destroyed, unsalvageable, and of no use anymore. He himself chose to have it amputated. For some people, the question of what happens to amputated body parts in hospitals may have never passed through your mind. Until now, of course. Oh boy. It'd be a long, arduous journey. A hard-fought battle, and much opposition faced in order for him to keep his foot. He asked the doctor and signed some paperwork. As it turns out, hospitals are very accommodating to this sort of thing, and not without good reason. It turns out to be a matter of religious and funerary respect. Some customs and traditions make the designation for the deceased to be buried whole, so hospitals have to accommodate those requests in the name of equality, fairness, and avoiding discrimination. Yes, Sigrid. Very good. So, the first matter is solved. Acquisition! Ta-da! Acquisition, everybody, we got it. Target acquired. This is not... The image is just a placeholder, not actually... He has a whole imager album of his destroyed foot, the x-rays, and the severed foot. I'm not linking those or sharing those. You need to find those on by yourself. So this is just going to be a placeholder. Oh yeah. Once in a lifetime opportunity. So, placeholder image. This is Shiny's own foot. Ethically obtained. It's not taken from anyone else. It's not obtained from an unquiet state of mind. His foot was hanging on his body, unable to be used and causing pain. And it is practical, in the sense that it avoids waste. I do wonder the limits of bodily autonomy, but that's a philosophical debate for another day. This seems easy to gloss over, but it is an incredibly hot topic of discussion in this current setting. Many people have concerns about the sourcing of their meat and ethical treatment of animals. Some people turn away from meat to vegetarianism or veganism over concerns about the treatment of animals and the condition they're raised in. Meat alternatives are gaining traction even among those who don't care about sourcing, if only for the sake of taste. Acquisition of your meals is something that is easy to forget when you sit down to the plate and bowl in front of you. Do you know where your vegetables are grown? What they are treated with? What was the name of the farmer that grew them? How many hands and miles they passed through to reach you? In this sense, Shiny has cut out the middleman of even the farm-to-table principle. He has not only achieved, but bested the most ethical observers, short of those who grow vegetables in their backyard. You see? So, that's one matter of ethics done, sourcing. And moving on with our tale, consumption wasn't even the first thing on his mind. I agree with this myself. Yeah, that's exactly... You got it right. Consumption wasn't even the first thing on his mind. He planned to freeze-dry his foot. Yeah. Or have it stuffed. But no taxidermist would take him seriously. And who could blame them if you had that sort of conversation over the phone? Oh. You got Battletoads? No? Wait, what'd I do? What'd I do? I just want to know if you have... Oh. You don't need to be so rude, okay? And the other option was prohibitively expensive at the price tag of $1,200. What to do? What to do? You have this thing that possesses a very limited lifespan, and you need to find something noteworthy to do with it, or else it'll just rot and sit unloved in the back of a freezer. And thank you for the follow. Thank you very much. Why? Why though? So, when they were tossing it around and playing with the thing, Shiny came to the realization there was no connection, physical or emotional, physical, left to his disconnected limb. In his words, there wasn't some deep part of me that felt weirded out by it. In fact, that was the weirdest part, was that it wasn't weird. Disconnected. Emotionally disconnected. Physically disconnected. The decision to cut off a portion of the shin came, and the meat was now butchered. The rest of the foot was used to have a cast made, and then cremated, which now sits in his girlfriend's living room at the time of this article. I get the feeling that many people here may have grown up with the idea that throwing away food is terrible. So there's only one thing to do with it. Invite 10 of your closest friends to have foot tacos. You heard me. Foot tacos, everybody. It's pig trotter, I assure you. And therein lies the next issue of Cannibalism. Consent. Informed consent, that is. They were not in dire straits, nor was anyone deceived as to the nature of their meal. Not... Good joke. He does. Dr. Boomsow, they got a cut from the shin. It's not just a ankle. It was a little bit above the shin as well, if you ever need to look up the pictures. So they used shin meat. Shin meat. Thank you. Thank you very much, Why though? Let's go back to the Omnivore's Dilemma. I have a request to make of you. I have something to ask you. Imagine for me a carton of eggs. They are labeled free-range, organic eggs, laid by hens, proudly free of antibiotics. That sounds much more appealing than the bland store brand, doesn't it? And perhaps you feel a pang of guilt paying $1.29 as opposed to $3.79 for the dozen. Oh no, am I a bad person for buying the cheap eggs? I will condense what facades you face in this constructed dilemma. In America, at least, many terms are not as protected as they are abroad. Your cream cheese spread is not true cream cheese. Your cheese product contains less milk than you might imagine. And your organic, free-range eggs free of antibiotics are not the idyllic pastures and red barns you see on the package. To make it organic, they have to be fed organic feed of corn and soy. It has little to do with the quality of the chicken itself. And free range? There are several things we must clarify here. How many hours a day are they on this range? How much space do they get? What is the quality of the land they get to roam on? At what point are they given access to it in their life? Have you actually questioned what free range meant when you saw it on a package? My patience. My source tells me that after 5 weeks of being shut-ins with food and water still in their sheds, 2 doors open, you'll find a grassy yard, 15 feet in length along the sheds that hold 20,000 birds in them. Not nearly enough to accommodate them all. 15-foot yard. Here's the heartbreaking part. The chickens are set in their ways after 5 weeks of food, water, and shelter. They don't even think of wandering outside to this free range. And that's by design. Oh yes, that's by design. These proudly free of antibiotic chickens would be much worse off if they did. Let's look. Quote, "These defenseless, crowded, and genetically identical birds are exquisitely vulnerable to infection. This is one of the larger ironies of growing organic food in an industrial system. It is even more precarious than a conventional industrial system." So, buy your eggs free of guilt, or perhaps with more guilt. I'm not here to say what should be done, only to impart knowledge. Let's get back to our subject matter. This is a cut of meat, but this is a cut of meat wherein you know exactly what happened to it. You know the grower personally. You are aware of their character and the treatment of the meat. You can't get a more sterile preparation than that of an operating room. Chalk went up for the cannibals. They win this round of consent. The rest of our tale goes without much fanfare. Shiny's chef friend marinated the meat, prepared it with onions, pepper, salt, pepper, lime juice, served on corn tortillas. Shiny and his band of 10 cannibal friends then partook, with only one spitting him out. How was it? Well, it runs contrary to what we might imagine. Shiny says this cut was beefy. Very beefy, not quite like the lean white meat of domestic pork. And everybody, I finally have something I can share with you. There's the recipe. There's the recipe transcribed by Shiny's friend. The recipe for foot tacos. I can share this, at least. So, please enjoy. Go ahead and try it out. Tell me what you think. So there it is. Ethical cannibalism. It can exist, it seems. Can you see any issues with this? Maybe a lack of USDA certification to guarantee healthy meat. That's about it. We'll send some letters in asking them to establish a new department. What would it take for you to partake yourself? It sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? That's the end of this section, by the way. It sounds ridiculous, it sounds crazy, but it's a real story. Real Ask Me Anything, a real interview held with him. Not the reason to get a motorcycle, yeah. You just, no. See, the secret is you have to know a friend with a motorcycle. It's like knowing a friend with a car. You want to eat foot, you have to know a friend with a motorcycle. You don't need to buy one yourself. Oh boy. I'm glad I finally got back to the section where I can have a little bit of fun with things. And as much as I enjoy the somber topics, being able to be a little tongue-in-cheek about it is very refreshing. Need friends with feet? No! Alright. If you've been counting, that was part 5 out of part 7, and with our introduction and conclusion, there's only one more main topic that we have to go over for today. This will be our last segment for the evening before the conclusion. We have discussed anthropophagy in a variety of forms. Ethical, desperate, fictional, and actual cannibalism. So naturally, what lies at the end of our journey here must be none other than criminal. So many instances and people to choose from. I've given serious thought into my choice here. There's one obvious choice in particular, but I came to the conclusion that there has been an overexposure in the recent past given to famed serial killers and their glorification and depiction. They don't need more attention. They never needed it anyway. Oh yeah, Grieving Vine, this may be, if you're not interested in hearing about cannibalism, this segment may be a little bit rougher. So, fair warning. The serial killers don't need more attention, they never needed it anyway. And many of the notable figures are dead, in any case. Be too easy of a feat to punch down at a dead man. So we would not utter the name of dead. Why would people be here with the stream title and impart sticks? Oh. I think he went to go get some food. We will not utter the name of dead cannibal serial killers here, for they should be buried in history and exhumed, only for education's sake by those who have much more credibility than I do. Let's try something singularly more terrifying. A living, breathing cannibal killer. And now more. We need to go further. A living, breathing cannibal killer who walks free to this day. You could, in the right place, cross his path. You could meet his gaze, brush shoulders, or hold the door open for him. There'd be no secret here. He could declare his past at the top of his voice, and not a legal force in the world would touch him. Does that bother you? Knowing that there lives someone today whom you could meet, and they'll tell you about the taste of human flesh, procured from murder, unassailable by the law. I am talking about the Kobe cannibal Issei Sagawa. Now once more, I need to decide where lines are drawn. I have a duty to protect my patients, but you came here with the understanding of today's topic and heeded the content warnings I've set up. So we need to meet in the middle here. Give and take. I put the onus on you to pursue what is learned henceforth any further. You will receive his name and story, but nothing more. Images can be burned into one's mind very easily, more easily than one might expect. I will not glorify this man by showing his face. The general populace of my stream can rest knowing that he is a faceless nothing, and his visage will not haunt or visit them in the still of night. I've heard the sentiment before, so I can't take credit. Sometimes people are just born differently. Not broken, just different. They are missing parts, or perhaps they have too much in them. Please ponder whether you think Sagawa was born lacking something, born with too much in him, or something else altogether. We must first have an account of the crime Sagawa is guilty of, yet not prosecuted for. It was in Paris, France, in June of 1981. 1981 seems to be a popular vintage for cannibalism years. Sagawa was an exchange student studying at the Sorbonne, along with René Hartvelt, a Dutch exchange student. Sagawa had frequently invited prostitutes to his home and secretly held a gun up to them from behind, trying to work up the courage to shoot them. Hartvelt would be his victim one evening. He shot her through the skull, and then proceeded to carnally violate her corpse, committing necrophilia and cannibalism. The details of the act and his account of it are gruesome and repulsive. You will not be receiving them here. During this time, he took many photographs, about 30 photographs, later seized by the police. They're also available online. Gawa was caught when he tried to dispose of what remained of the body, attempting to dump Hartfeldt's corpse in a remote lake. He was subsequently arrested and was declared to have mental impairment, legally insane, and unfit to stand trial. Oh boy. I don't envy the police that get this sort of thing. He is illegally insane and unfit to stand trial, escaping his punishment. He's insane. This is a twisted man, not of a sound mind. The law cannot prosecute him. When he was deported back to Japan, French justice officials refused to transfer the necessary documents for his prosecution, the result allowing him to go free. That is the summary of Sagawa's crime and later release. He couldn't be tried in France. He was eventually deported back to Japan, but they could not get the necessary documents to Japanese officials, and so they had nothing to prosecute him on. That's his crime and release. He did it. There's no denial here. He did it. What do we say about a man like that? Sick and twisted would be a simple start. Sagawa possesses a medley of disgusting, reprehensible penchants and thoughts. Warning, if you look in that Vice article, he is very explicit, very disgusting. In his interview, he is very frank about his fetishes and desires for women. He would say that his crimes are spurred on by his sexual desires as his primary motivator. He has strong feelings towards beautiful women, an obsession with them. Even as a child in first grade, Sagawa desired the fleshy thigh meat of his classmate, but he put those feelings aside as the classmate was a male. Good evening, Claudio. You joined at an interesting time. That is enough of the man. We know he is depraved and worthy of any number of repugnant labels. That's not the worst of it. Sagawa enjoys a life as an author of many books, an author of a large number of magazine entries, guest appearances, consultations, art, CDs, and many more avenues of the spotlight derived from his fumbled murder case. At the time of the 2009 interview, he had released 20 books. Yes, Claudia, that's exactly what happened. What we'll be looking at here is the media reception of his tale, the media reception of what happened. We will turn the clock back to that summer of 1981. The French media was abuzz, speculating and thirsty to know his motives for the crime. Speculation wondered if he had a breakdown living abroad in France, unable to communicate well. The Board of Media Ethics even discussed the issue of anonymity, or in some publications used his full name outright, Issei Sagawa, and some censored it to simply Asan. The trickling of details and speculation tantalized the public. Sagawa's confession only added fuel to the fire as it became the story of a crazed lover, unrequited love, romantic turned maniac. He encouraged this with tidbits of quotes to stoke the embers. The story worked its way into secondary news, becoming the topic of casual conversation and throwaway jokes. Kind of like the whole how we talk about killer clowns, you know? We'll just like have a conversation, clowns will come up, and it's like, yeah, you know, killer clown. But that happened? Yeah. Similar to that. Sagawa got such attention for a few reasons. First, he was a foreign, alien man committing 3 unspeakable crimes of murder, necrophilia, and cannibalism. Furthermore, the target was a foreign, white woman. Many eyes were on this case, and the information was mismanaged, leaving readers curious, never satisfied with what they had read. This lack of concise information and solid account, with only a nebulous motivation, led to Sagawa making his first book, Into the Fog. The book flirts with the line between fiction and non-fiction, though public perception viewed it as fact. The victim's family appealed that he could not write and profit from these books if he was legally insane. That's a fair point, isn't it? You're insane and you're writing this book while you're being held, possibly tried for murder? No, that's not what an insane person would do. This was the beginning of Sagawa's wormy little post-cannibal existence. He would write or appear in something. Outrage would flare up. And then he would publicly defend himself, asserting his existence. He constantly slithers into the eye of the media, milking his crime and the public's criticisms of him. Sagawa even made a second updated, more complete version of Into the Fog called Mirage in 1991. Going back to 1984, Sagawa was released. He was released back into Japan, and he was free after the case could not be pursued. His extended 15 minutes of fame may have died down, and he may have been forgotten. If it wasn't for the Tsutomu Miyazaki incident in 1989. Miyazaki was a man who ended up killing several young girls. This revived the shock and concerns people held regarding the developing post-war culture Japanese society was allowing. Sagawa was welcomed back into the spotlight as a commentator on the incident for 2 reasons. First, he was easy to contact and loved the attention. Second, he would generate juicy quotes for the magazines to help sell copies. Then a gross metamorphosis was allowed to occur. Sagawa began to shift from assailant to victim. When criticized for commenting on the Miyazaki case, that gave him the chance to defend himself, saying he'd be talked about anyway, so why not take the initiative? He could control the narrative, let his presence come from him directly. There we have the disheartening cycle of the media. Sagawa comments. The media criticizes him. Sagawa defends himself. And so on, cementing his place in the attention of the public. Sagawa would publicly say things like, quote, his human rights are being infringed because the foreign ministry was dragging its feet in issuing him a passport, and he claimed the American embassy had refused him a visa. That's a thought, isn't it? Howdy, neighbor! How'd you feel about if this guy moved into your apartment building, moved in next door? You go and see him when he goes shopping. It's awful, isn't it? But, you know, his human rights are infringed upon, you know? Yeah. As if this wasn't enough, he moved on to the stage. A public gathering in Tokyo with about 20 people attending. He would go on to television appearances, writing magazine articles, making books, art, and so on. As Kushner writes, he is an artist whose only talent is writing about his crime he committed long ago. Since the details of the event are no longer interesting, he has shifted the media's treatment of himself. He has shifted to the media's treatment of himself and the sexual nature of his obsessions. He even entered the world of academia as an invited panelist to a symposium on fetishes at Waseda University in November 1991. His associations with murder take a back seat to his associations with sex and fetishes now. Sagawa is a free man, but he is estranged and ostracized from typical society. There is no place for him other than a proverbial freak show to go and gawk at. He explains that since he is removed from society, he takes up the role of examining it from the outside to offer his viewpoints and comment on it. From assailant to a victim, Sagawa has shifted from criminal into oddity, seen as more of a pervert or fetishist. He dances in the eye of the media to earn his bread, singing and juggling to sell more books, articles, and appearances. Sagawa wants us to believe that he is bearing a cross, which is to be the target of the media for profit, and because he has no choice. We should now, it appears, now sympathize with his victim status. He frets over his own condition. That's it. That's my explanation of Issei Sagawa. He lives to this day. He is free. His story's not ended. He hasn't been lynched or the subject to, mob violence. He's a free man. What do you say about that? He just goes free, he gets to kill somebody, violate her corpse, eat her, and then he gets to be an author. He gets to be an artist, a public figure, interviewed, people want to know what he thinks. Rather disgusting. So there it is. We've come to the conclusion of today's lesson. If you have any questions, please ask them now. Oh yeah. Reality can be a joke in very poor taste, yep. We've come to the conclusion. If you have any questions, please ask them now and I will field them at the end of the conclusion. You may ask about my own thoughts on what we learned or more clarification on aspects we talk about, just please keep them pertaining to the topic of today's lesson. Yes, I recall seeing that Eglo of his brother and caretakers take care of him now. That's unsourced, so I can't really say that, but that's my belief the situation is. If you've walked away with a new scrap of knowledge stitched to yourself, or one of your worldviews challenged, then I can say today has been a success, at least in my eyes. As I've mentioned, I'm not here to try and change your mind to sway you to any end of the spectrum regarding certain topics of morality. My own feelings are largely irrelevant here. I can only offer you knowledge. I also pondered long and hard on whether I present this lesson before or after my debut, and accordingly affiliation. There is a risk I carry taking these sort of topics into the world of monetization. I think that if I was going to do this, talk about cannibalism, it had to be before I was an affiliate and held to stronger standards, lest they could take away from me if it went poorly. The lessons will continue, but the topics, even I don't know what is in store. I am gripped with inspiration and the need to impart this minor curse unto others. They also take an inordinate amount of time to prepare, especially if I want to do this right and properly. When I was here, doing my lesson on torture, I was notably more somber, reverent. That is partly due to the subject matter, and partly due to the trepidation I held then. There was a reservation held in my heart. I was concerned if who I was conducive to streaming in the platform. I was worried if I was to be a black sheep, cast out and untouchable, unspeakable. I'm resolute now. My heart is steel, my blood runs cold. If I am to be labeled a black sheep, then it will be by the same ink I have stained myself with. I am here. Witness me. I know very well now what I want to be, what I want to be seen as. I want to occupy a very specific space in your heart. When you gaze upon my works, I want your heart to scream. I want your heart to cry out, Jesus Christ, Pestis! That is why I will break tradition and tell you the topic of my next lesson right here and now. I don't know when it'll be ready, but I know what it will be. I won't say it. I need somebody else to say it for me. Who is this? What is this? Oh wait. I'm sure somebody here knows. That's right. I think... Caleb. I think my next lesson will be on that. Caleb. Thank you. I had to be very, very careful. I looked up the TOS. Twitch does not allow content that depicts, glorifies, encourages, or supports terrorism, or violent extremist actions or acts. This includes threatening to or encouraging others to commit acts that would kill, that would result in serious physical harm to groups or people, or significant property destruction. Goddamn, Caleb! You may not display or link terrorist or extremist propaganda, including graphic photo, pictures, or footage of terrorist or extreme violence, even for the purposes of denouncing such content. Focus. Focus. So, that means I have to tiptoe very, very very carefully on how I discuss this, even renouncing what he's done, even renouncing what he says. I'd have to look at this from the outside, like media reception effects on society and culture. So I need to be very, very careful about how I handle this. I can't link anything. I can't probably even quote part of his manifesto. Creeping Vine Tea, that is... I'll say it. There's nothing wrong with saying it right now. The effect is gone. That is the Unabomber. He is a person who put out like a 35,000 word manifesto. Yes, domestic terrorism opinions, of course, bombs. He bombed with no like rhyme or reason, which is why he was so scared at the time, or scary at the time, because he didn't know like when he'd be popping up, and he had very profound effects on American culture, American society. So he's a very important figure. There's a lot of bad people, but the effects of what he did in particular and what he wrote changed a lot. That is what I think I will discuss next, but I have to check, double check. I have to be ironclad if I'm going to do this. Absolutely ironclad. Yeah, he's a very awful person. The story of how he got caught is fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. But let's move over here. Now, I'd like to thank all of you. I had a question I saw. Now, is there a lesson or theme you'd like to take with us? I think if there's anything you want to take away from this, just be very conscious of the words you say. Be very conscious of the impact you have with your words. The weight of a word is a very powerful thing, and understand the history behind what you say as well. I think there's something you would take away from that, understand it. And now, at the end of this, I have an announcement to make. Let me go ahead and prepare some stuff. Thank you. I'm glad everybody enjoyed it. There's something special that I've wanted to do for a little while, and now I think it's the time. Everybody, I'm very excited for this. Here it is. Dr. Pestis's debut, affiliate, and follower celebration. That's right. I have decided on a day. I have my live 2D. It will be happening. Everybody, it's right here. Like it, retweet it, do it, do it, do it. It'll be on November 13th, 6 p.m. this time that I started this. There'll be a special fingerprinting lesson. I have offered unto you my mind, my soul, but not my body yet. So I am offering my body in the form of fingerprinting. You will see my real fingerprints. Oh yeah. Scandalous, I know, right? That is what you have to... That is what you can expect to have here. And afterwards, there will be a slumber party at Secret and Birds. So please look forward to that. That is going to be after my debut. Man, like and retweet at the doc? Oh, please. I'm not that stuck up. I'm very pretentious, but I'm not that stuck up. The world needs to know who I am, after all. So thank you. I'm very excited. Thank you very much. I am so happy that you've been able to join me for this today. Thank you so much. As for what happens now, well, I have my live 2D. I will go on, I will stream. I don't know what I'll do yet. I was thinking about some games, of course, maybe going back to that. Obviously going back to that. Lessons take a long time to prepare. And so, that'll happen eventually. It's going to be back to things I enjoy doing. Probably, I was thinking about Darkest Dungeon, All Plague Doctors. And yes, congratulations on 300 followers, I noticed. I gotta say something about that. You people are insane. I don't stream for a week, and I get 100 followers doing nothing. You are nuts. You have good taste, but you're nuts. Requests to talk about on stream? No. The requests are of my own inspiration. They're of my choosing entirely. You guys are crazy. Thank you very much. I adore all of you, and that's why the debut affiliate and follower celebration is as such. Now, I know exactly what I can do. I've been waiting for the chance to repay the favor. I said one day I will repay the kindness shown to me. We're going to go over to Secret and Birds. That's right, Secret and Birds. They have been so kind to me. Such great people. Yeah, Sigbird time. They're so cool. I'm glad everybody here enjoys them the same as I do. We're going to go ahead and prepare that raid. Thank you all so much once again. Like it says in the tweet, I held off because I need to wait until I became what I advertised. Until I became a streamer worthy of your support and therefore time. And I feel like I'm ready now. That's my stake, my flag in the ground. 1113. Thank you very much. Your kind words aren't lost on me, they won't fall to the floor. I accept all the niceties you have for me, and they mean a lot. Thank you. We have a tradition here. I diagnose you with is our usual raid message. I diagnose you with looking delicious. That is our raid message for today. Thank you very much, everybody. Please copy and paste it just like that. And we're going to go over to Secret and Birds. They're doing some Breath of the Wild, which I adore, and they might do more Ultra Kill. Have a nice evening, everyone. Thank you for joining me once more.